Welcome to Relentless Truth with John Warren, the podcast that extracts truth from a wide range of topics, revealing who God is, who we are, and how we relate to each other. Now, here's John with this week's powerful and practical insights.
Welcome to Relentless Truth. I'm John Warren. Please like, share, review, and subscribe to Relentless Truth. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Please go to our website, johnwarrenmedia.com, for more information. You can send along an email to me there at john@johnwarrenmedia.com, or you can just simply use our contact form on the website. Well, we've had some interesting issues recently, and I know these episodes are released a few weeks after they are recorded, but we've had the Donald Trump arraignment. We've had some interesting economic issues. And this week, I really want to talk about the role of government in the economy. This economy interests me, and I know I talk about it a lot, and I know there's some redundancy because there's only so much you can say about the economy, but I am fascinated by the implications of COVID-19 on our economy. I don't still understand employment in this economy. I think the baby boomers kind of retiring and staying home and doing other things has a lot to do with our being so fully employed. When the unemployment rate is below 4%, we are fully employed. I know that doesn't help you if you're looking for a job and can't find one, or can't find the right one, or can't find one that is desirable, or can't find one at the right compensation level. I understand that there are some people who are hurting, especially in the context of rising prices, and that's still kind of not out of control, but that's an exacerbating factor on this economy. It's still tough to go to your supermarket and experience these prices. And then there are still some shortages, and the shortages are less prevalent, less widespread, but there are some shortages still of specialty goods. The car market, the automobile market in America has changed. The manufacturers have, I think, deliberately slowed production. They're finding that we will pay more if there is some scarcity, and that kind of makes sense for those of you who've studied economics. You know, if supply is reduced and demand is kind of constant, then it seems to me that prices typically rise. Well, that has happened. I'm a bit of a car nut, and it used to be that you had choices. You could go and shop, and there were different color alternatives and different. And there still are, and there still are different grade levels and all the rest. But lots of people are buying cars before they get to the dealer, and because the production has slowed. And I'm not smart enough to know whether it's because of manufacturing cutbacks or supply chain issues or some combination, or we haven't quite recovered from the COVID slowdown as the media would have us believe. I'm not sure what it is. It might be a combination of those things, but that market has changed, and the economy has changed. And I wonder, I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, but it seems to me that people have changed the way they spend money. And I have to wonder, is it because we survived a pandemic, kind of like the Spanish flu in the early 20th century, and that brought on kind of the Roaring '20s. We survived World War I and the Spanish flu, and are we just so glad to be here that we've kind of said, well, let's go for it? That appears to be what happened. And then you've got our government's involvement in this. You've got the government printing money for stimulus and PPP, payroll protection program. If you're not familiar, put millions and millions of dollars, if not billions, in the hands. Yeah, it was billions in the hands of companies throughout the country who maintained within the boundaries of a formula their payroll. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I can't really do it well for you. I'd like to. I think history tells this story better than I do guessing at what's really going on. I can just say it's peculiar. It's peculiar that asset prices, and when I say that, I'm specifically, you could mean a lot of things when you say that, but I'm specifically talking about the housing market and the stock market, haven't really adjusted dramatically. Those markets are kind of back to normal, if there is a normal, especially in the housing market. You're not seeing the crazy pricing and the bidding and all of that. But in Florida, where I am, there still is competition for if a good house is well priced, it sells pretty quickly, and you might have to compete for it. If it's not such a great house and it's not so great priced, though now it's not sold at such a great price or offered at such a great price, then it kind of sits around a little bit. And that was, a year ago, that was not happening. So when I peel this back and try to look at root causes, which I tend to do, then I have to go back and think about, okay, what is government's role in the economy? And that is a really challenging issue to unpack. And it's very challenging to talk about succinctly. And our media tends to like to polarize us. And I say like intentionally. There are media camps on both sides of this issue. Just think of the simplest way is far left and far right media. They tend to want to have us believe that they understand, and their talking heads, their pundits, understand the purpose of government or the way government is to relate to the economy. And I think both sides get it wrong. And it's funny because you'll hear all media across the spectrum. Let's stop the liberal and conservative thing, and let's just say media in general. They will say things like the Biden economy, or the Trump economy, or the Obama economy, or the Bush economy, or they'll describe the implications of those four recent presidents' efforts economically as if the executive branch of government is somehow responsible for the economy. And so the environment we find ourselves in, and I think it's due largely to the way, I don't want to sound like a dinosaur, but I think it's largely due to the way we get our news. It's funny. I was just talking to a friend about this, that in the old days, for something to bubble up to a level that gets national attention, it had to go through the editors of newspapers. There were some national newspaper, and they're still around, but the New York Times, the Washington Post, and there are others. I don't want to leave any out, but those types. And then there was the Wall Street Journal, which focused on business primarily back then. It's gotten more into news now. And then there were the three big networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC, and maybe one or two others came along, but they're NPR and some of those things. But it had to, the news story had to kind of go through a process to get pushed out there, and it was slower. You kind of couldn't wait to get the morning newspaper at the end of your driveway back then, because you'd read, oh, here's what they said about this, and here's what the editorials were, and all that. Well, we've gained some things. We get better information more quickly. Well, we get more information more quickly. Let's say it that way. And we still have to kind of decipher, still have to kind of consider the source. But this news cycle means that something like Donald Trump's arraignment earlier this week, it gets blasted on the news and examined and cross-examined. And then after a couple of days, it's gone. I mean, now he's a little bit of an exception because he has these passionate followers and passionate haters, and you still hear it mentioned, but these stories they circulate like wildfire, and then they go away, and we're on to the next shiny object that floats by. So I think that's part of the problem, the way the media just operates. But the media has become this, I don't know, they play this accountability game where they want to hold the administration's feet to the fire. So you have 24-hour access to media, and then the media wants access to the White House all the time and to Congress. And the two-party system is really not what our founders envisioned when they wrote the Constitution. But it's what we have today. And either side relishes the opportunity to make the other side look bad. So you put all that together, and each administration in recent memory, and I think it was different 20 or 30 years ago, but maybe not. Each administration goes out of its way to try to look good, to try to play to the press. And I know it sounds old school to say it, but opinion polls, we lick our fingers, see which way the wind's blowing before we take a position, and certainly before we talk about things a certain way. And so it made me cringe. I'll give you an example of this. It made me cringe when Donald Trump would take credit for the stock market. And it makes me cringe when the press says the Biden economy does this or that. Back when oil prices were skyrocketing, this is the Biden economy. They try to pin it on the Biden administration. Even liberal press outlets did that. Oh my goodness, gas has doubled in price. It's Joe Biden's fault. And we know, smart listeners of Relentless Truth, you know that Joe Biden really doesn't determine oil prices. Now, I know some of you are gasping, well, he's an idiot or whatever it is you think of him. You think that, that's fine. I'm not a big fan of his for sure. I'm not a fan of his at all. But I don't lay at his doorstep all of the economic indicators, all of the performance of the U.S. economy. The president sets the tone in this media age, this rapid media age. Of course, the president sets the tone more so than ever. But if you go back to, World War I, World War II, the Great Depression, you go back through all of our history, there's been tone setting by leaders for a long time. And I believe that that's important. Communication is important. The confidence in the economy by the consumer is most important. I'm not understating the importance of the office of the presidency. It's not a figurehead position. It does more with executive orders and other things than our framers of our Constitution envisioned, I believe. But if we just look at this issue and we say, okay, what is government's role in the economy? I think that's a conversation worth having. And I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to fix this with a podcast episode. But I think it might be interesting just to kind of review it for a minute. So you have this beautiful Constitution, and give or take, it has about 5,000 words, whether you're counting all the amendments or not. But it's a brief document. It's one of the most concise governing documents in the world, including all of our 50 state constitutions. I think it's true. I'm not 100% certain of this, but I believe I read that this is the most brief of the constitutions of all of the states. If you compare the U.S. Constitution to the states, most states have, many, many more words, paragraphs, pages length than the U.S. Constitution. And there are times where I wish the framers had been clairvoyant and could have looked ahead and written more. But more often than not, there are times I wish they had written less or been more precise in a couple of sections. And we've talked about that on this podcast. If you have an interest in learning more, you can go back and look at some of our, I think I did a 3-part series on the U.S. Constitution some time ago. You can find it. If you struggle to find it, send a note to me and I'll send the episodes to you or point out where they are. So you have this document though, and it lays out for us in Article 1, the Congress, Article 2, the presidency or the executive branch, and then Article 3 is all about the judiciary. And really, none of these sections are lengthy. The one on the Congress is the most lengthy, followed by the presidency. The presidency section, though, is really brief compared to the one on the Congress. And then you have Article 3 is the judiciary, and it is barely a full page if you look at it on 8.5 by 11 paper with reasonable font. So it spells out the judiciary and even the treasury in one section. But Article 1 tells us, what the role of the Congress is, and each of these sections has kind of qualifications for holding office and process for elections. But Article 2 is interesting, the one on the presidency. I want to focus on that one just for a minute, since we talk often about the ex-president, whatever the president's name is at the time, it's his economy. What's interesting about this is, you can by inference say, he is the president of the United States, so he's responsible for everything. But you're really stretching the Constitution to suggest that the president is responsible for the economy. And I know constitutional scholars have opined on this, but I'm not going to play a constitutional scholar. But even if you go back to the beginning, the preamble of the Constitution, or the beginning of Article 1, you're going to find this, and I know you've memorized this, or maybe memorized a song to this effect, but the people of the United States, the purpose of the Constitution, we state in the preamble, is to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, that's complicated, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And then it goes on, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, and then they dive in to the Congress, the legislative branch, and we have a bicameral Congress, a House and the Senate, and they explain very clearly the roles, the terms they serve, the frequency of meeting, and all the rest. It's really quite a beautiful document. I quite like it. I like to read it. I like to study it. I like to reference it whenever certain things happen. It's got some cool concepts most people don't know. Most people don't know what a bill of attainder is, for example, or ex post facto law. There's just some things that are helpful to know, and you can study this stuff on your own. Just get a copy and read it. But this whole business of the government, U.S. government, and the economy fascinates me. When we get to Article 2, it says in Section 1, the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and together with the vice president, chosen for the same term, be elected as follows. And then it goes through several paragraphs, a quite lengthy one, that talks about the Electoral College, what we call the Electoral College, the election process. And yes, it's complex, and yes, it feels archaic, but it's beautiful. It really does allow smaller states to participate in electing our president. That's the argument, the constitutional argument I would make for being in favor of leaving it alone. Those who favor a purely democratic process that is kind of the mob rule that some of our framers warned us about. You say, oh, it's just not fair. How can a president win the popular vote? Well, if you study the Electoral College, you'll get it. I think most people do, and it just makes more sense. You would only have presidential elections the only consequential campaigning would be done in 4 or 5 states if it was the majority of the population, the majority of the registered voters electing a president without the Electoral College. So that's another conversation for another way. But this document goes on, and it says that the Congress can choose the electors, and then it goes on in another paragraph, next paragraph, that no person except a natural-born citizen of the United States can serve as president. And then it talks about removal from office due to his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers. We've got some amendments that address some of these issues. And it talks about the president and vice president in this section, and it goes on to describe other other officers. It contemplates disability. And again, we have some amendments that do that as well, as you know. But then it says that the president will receive compensation for his duties, and it can't be increased or diminished during the period for which he shall have been elected. That means over his 4-year term, and it goes on. And then finally, in Section 1 of Article 2, it describes this oath of office that all of our presidents take. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And all presidents since George Washington, I believe this is true, have added the phrase, "So help me God." I'm certain all in my recent memory have done that. And then we go into Section 2, which is about the role the president plays as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy. And of course, we've added the Air Force. In the original Constitution, it just contemplates Army, Navy, and militia. We didn't have planes. And then it sort of spells out what Commander-in-Chief means in a way. And then it talks about his powers with advice and consent of the Senate. And we've already kind of established when you get to this point in the Constitution that the Senate is a little more special, a little more august than the House in some respects. Part of that is they serve 6-year terms. They do some things with advice and consent of the Senate. They do some things with the presidency that are laid out here and in the Article 1. But they appoint ambassador. The president can appoint ambassadors with their advice and consent, ministers, consuls, and judges of the Supreme Court. And you know how contentious those appointments have been of late. And then there are other judges that are appointed and heads of departments and all that good stuff. And then it says that the president can fill vacancies in the Senate and that fill these jobs, and they expire at the end of their next session. And then it goes on in Section 3 to talk about the fact that there's kind of a State of the Union. It's not quite, I don't think they envisioned what we do now with the big media circus, but it could even be done in writing based on the Constitution. But it's a State of the Union. It's and he may, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses or either of them in case of disagreement between them, and he can determine when they adjourn their sessions and all the rest. It goes on. And then there's one small section, Section 4, that says that these people, the president, vice president, and civil officers can be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. You've heard that language, sadly, during the Trump administration a couple of times. And then it goes on to Article 3. Now, I want to just point out some things. And I know, there are other articles here that address the powers of government. After you get past the judiciary, you have Article 4, Article 5 that really addresses the amendment process. And then you have Article 6 that talks about debts and other things, and the supremacy clause and no religious test. So there's more information here, but in this section that we just read that is about defining the role of the President of the United States, if you notice, and you can go through this with a fine-tooth comb, I didn't, to spare you a 2-hour podcast episode, but there's nothing about the economy. And that is by design. It's when you say the executive power shall be invested in the United States, in a president of the United States of America. What is that? Well, the framers didn't say. And I'm going to tell you why. They didn't say because there was a great debate about whether we even needed a president. There were some in the room in Philadelphia when this beautiful document was written, who said, well, wait a minute, how do we know we won't have tyranny? We won't have another King George III. Let's not do that. We don't even need a national executive. Just let the Congress duke it out. Let's do a judiciary and a legislative branch and leave it at that. But the folks that wanted a national executive won, probably because of the character and just the stature, just the power that he exhibited when he walked in the room of George Washington. the folks who wanted a chief executive won. And there were many times where, one of the things you learn if you learn constitutional theory, there were many times where the men in that room had to compromise. Compromise was a theme of the Constitutional Convention the successful one that actually led to the writing and ratifying of this beautiful document. But you don't see, either directly or through implication, any evidence that we could charge the president with the way the economy goes. Now, fast forward, we create, Alexander Hamilton creates a national bank, and all of that leads to the ultimate creation of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve Bank, an independent bank with a board of governors that rotate this onto this Federal Open Market Committee, and they set interest rates, and they have a triple mandate. They're supposed to grow the economy. It's a short way to say it. I've talked about it on this podcast before. And somehow it has come to be expected by the media, hence the American people, that the president will manipulate the economy out of bad times and is responsible for anything that goes wrong. And even Trump did this, even though I agreed with a lot of his governing policies. He took credit when the economy was doing well, and he blamed Barack Obama when it didn't. And he had a whole thing that he did, even though the president of the United States, other than having the bully pulpit, the big bullhorn that this office gives one, the president of the United States does not determine the growth or contraction in the stock market. The Congress doesn't really. Now, I know you're thinking, well, wait a minute. Now, if you had read that section on the Congress, you'd see that they can spend money, and they've spent us into oblivion. We have $32 trillion in debt. Yes, we do. And we have $50 trillion in unfunded commitments. So we really are upside down by $82 plus trillion. And until we start addressing that problem, we're not going to really have sound footing economically. The reason we feel the earth move periodically is because of some things that Congress has done. And then those of you who are astute with the Constitution, you know that the House has the purse, has the spending authority. And you say, wait a minute, you're skipping the whole House of Representatives and their importance during their 2-year terms to this entire process. So yes, there's a lot of blame we can cast, but primarily what I want to advocate, and I'm not a libertarian, I'm not a pure libertarian. I believe in way more liberty than most people, but I do want my roads to be paved. I want someone to come when I dial 911. I want some protection against bad guys. I want some parameters, some bumpers out there to keep us in the road in many, many respects, some level of social services, some protection for poverty, and all of those things. I'm not one of those people who says, I absolutely oppose redistribution of wealth. No, I get it. There's a role for government. And even within the scope of this Constitution, there's a role for government to play. So I'm not wanting just anarchy. I don't even like Ron DeSantis's concealed carry law that he passed behind closed doors, where anybody can have a concealed carry permit. And I'll tell you why. I have one. And I went through training for a day, and I walked into the room for that training with a bad attitude. So they did the big background check. I got qualified. I think first I went to the training, and then you go through the big background check and you get qualified, and you get this wonderful permit that allows you to conceal carry. And I really don't do that very often, hardly ever. I do carry in my vehicle sometimes, but I don't carry often, because there are a lot of places I can't carry that I frequent. I can't carry at the school I teach in, and I can't carry in a bank or public library or any number of other places. And I learned all that, although I kind of had a working knowledge. I learned what Florida's stand your ground law means, and how people violate it from time to time, and what it doesn't mean. And I learned what happens after you use a handgun, even defending yourself. And that training, I've got to tell you, it was helpful. And now somehow we can just carry just anybody. I mean, I don't like that at all. Now, it doesn't go into effect till July 1st. And I hope somebody, some judicial authority, grabs this thing and fixes it, because there's training that is necessary. I want a background check. I mean, there's some people who, I'm sorry if you're far right and you're going to disagree with this, but there's some people who don't need to be carrying. And I sure don't want open carry. I don't want to see your gun. I'm all about protecting yourself and all the rest. Got a friend who has a 4-step rule. He's got a gun in his house every 4 steps. And if it, I think you might live in the wrong neighborhood if that's what you got to do. But if that makes you feel good about yourself, then wonderful. You go for it. As we say in the South, knock yourself out. Not sure what that means exactly, but do it. That's fine. But anyway, I'm off track because I want to go back to the economy. Yes, there are some government policies that are important. Yes, the president sets the tone. Yes, consumer confidence matters. We're dealing with that right now. And yes, the president plays a role. A confident, steady-handed president is good for the economy. I'm not making an argument that government is unimportant. What I am arguing is that government plays a very specific role. Let me just give you an example. There are 2 extremes, aren't there, of government in the economy. There's a free market and there's socialism. We believe in a free market economy. Is that perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it's awfully good. We're okay with some redistribution of wealth. That happens in our system of taxation. So please don't shout, I don't believe in redistribution of wealth. What you're saying when you say that, most people who believe that are saying, I don't want the government doing a value-added tax or taking from the rich and giving to the poor. I understand what you're saying. I don't like socialism. Well, I don't either. We're not socialists. We're not even near socialism. We have some people who socialism. We have some people who take us there, but we're not near there. And we want to be guided by the principle of basic economic freedom. But we do accept government intervention in the economy when the benefit outweighs the cost. But this can be subjective. So there are kind of 2 kinds of policy, and you know about them. One is monetary. Just think of that as the activities of the Federal Reserve. It's interest rates, money supply, and all the rest. And then there's fiscal policy. That's the stuff Congress does. It's taxing, it's spending, execution of the laws and regulations by the executive branch. So yeah, the executive branch does get involved in the economy in that sense. And then there's this wonderful group called the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, and they're supposed to be independent, at least in the sense that they're apolitical. And they review legislation to determine its economic impact, its cost, and its damage it does to the deficit and debt, and its cost over time, and all of those things. You'll hear the CBO estimated that this bill is going to cost us $1.3 trillion or whatever it is. Then there's the president. I want to just talk about this. The executive branch is the Constitution, which we just read, says the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. So the president is supposed to execute or carry out the laws passed by Congress. And what we've learned over the years is we hire for these jobs. We elect particularly effective speakers. I'm trying not to use the word charismatic because not all of them are, but people we want to represent us abroad and at home. The Roman government philosophy, if I can call it that made its way into our Constitution is that our government is supposed to protect us from foreign invasion and give us tranquility and safety at home. That's it. So that's where it all kind of came from. But the president does set the tone, communicates, and leads. And leadership is something we could talk a lot about, but Ronald Reagan knew how to lead. There's yes, I miss him. Bill Clinton sort of knew how to lead in some ways. George H.W. Bush, not quite as much. George W. Bush, sorry. Barack Obama got it a little bit. Trump, yeah, for what, it's kind of like that line in whatever that movie is, Jerry Maguire. We love him for the man that he kind of sort of could be. then now President Biden, yeah, at some point he might have been effective, but not so much. So there's this desire that we have for the president to set the tone, communicate, and lead. Servant leadership that is effective, that is concise, that is articulate, that is articulated well, is just a beautiful thing to see. So then you have various departments of the federal government. And the one that relates to the economy is the U.S. Department of Treasury. And there others have a little something to do with it too. You know, we've got commerce and other things, transportation. But the Treasury Department is supposed to ensure the safety and soundness of the nation's financial system and promote economic growth and stability, they think. I don't see that in the Constitution, frankly. But that's what they say they do. I think they go way, way, way too far. They handle the financing of the national debt through the sale of Treasury bills, notes, and bonds, and those are delineated based on their maturity, and savings bonds and all that stuff. And then we have the government workers. You know, they've got a problem, and they've got a tough job. My experience with most federal government workers is they're awfully nice people, and they're in their role because of an aspiration to do good. But they can't avoid the fact that they are handling other people's money. And I've got example after example from my banking career of how that usually goes. You might have experienced this. Found money or handling other people's money or investing other people's money is just totally different. It's the one or two steps removed from it being your money. You manage your money more carefully, with more vigilance. Even good people do. The government is in the business, like it or not. In our world today, I don't think the Constitution anticipated it or planned for it. But the government is in the business, in a lot of cases, of deciding winners and losers in the economy. Even when their intentions are to solve problems, they decide winners and losers. If you can know where the government's going with something, I'm not talking about timing the stock market, although I guess you could do that. It feels ugly to me that some Congress people do it. But I'm not talking about just timing the stock market. I'm talking about knowing, you know, what our Defense Department's going to do next, or what a law change. I remember when the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was approved. We had to have Braille added to our drive-up ATMs for the bank I worked for, which I thought was interesting. But you know, companies in that business did better. So if you know those things ahead of time and you can anticipate trends and the direction government's going in, then that can be valuable to you economically. My students learn this stuff. They learn all about government in the economy when they really start to, they call it adulting, go out into the brave new world and sort of separate from their parents economically. It kind of really comes home to them. They learn this distinction, this role of government in the economy. But this is interesting, and I'm going to wrap it up with this. The government is not supposed to. This will reveal whether a person is truly a fiscal/economic conservative or liberal. I don't believe the government is supposed to engage in trying to correct for market failure or market fluctuations. I don't believe our economy is measured by GDP or anything else you want to use to measure it that is measurable. I don't believe government is responsible for taking the troughs out of the deal. I think naturally peaks and troughs occur in the economy. If you look at GDP, it looks like waves in the ocean if you track it over a long period of time. But if I could show you, and I know I've said this before, the way it actually played out, whenever government gets involved, they prolong the trough. Again and again, go back to the Great Depression, go back to the 1970s, go back to the post 9/11, go back to 2008 and 9, any period that now the COVID-19 period, when government intervenes to quote unquote stimulate the economy, they prolong the economic downturn. They're supposed to provide, on the other hand. So they're not there to correct for market failure. You've heard the too big to fail, you remember the AIG bailout, the cash for clunkers, the bailout for the auto industry, the TARP program for banks, and the stimulus and all that. The government means well, but they are there to provide for the public good, the general welfare. We just read it earlier in this episode, right from the preamble to the Constitution, the purpose of government. It's important to understand the purpose, the underlying purpose. It's not to correct for market failure. It's to provide public good, security, infrastructure. I'll even let you throw education in there, even though I don't think the Constitution contemplates it. I'll even let you add health care or some level of income support and some wealth redistribution. There, I said it. Not a lot, but some. But there you have it. Government believes it's there to ensure prosperity, and that is not the purpose of. It can be a safety net. I'm okay with that. I think you are, but it's not there to take the variability, take the natural cycles out of the economy. But they believe they are, and it's actually they react out of fear. They're afraid of getting moved out of office, and I like that fear. I think that's healthy. I want them to do good. But I don't want them reaching into the economy or thinking they have to. And I cringe when the press badmouths either side, anybody from the press on any end of the spectrum, liberal or conservative, badmouths anybody, liberal or conservative, Republican or Democrat, for their actions as if they are responsible for the economy. They're not. And I know we elect presidents, and I know it's all about the economy, stupid. I know we vote with our wallets. I know all those things, but I wish we didn't. I wish we elected presidents who did the right thing for the long haul. If you want to not get elected or lose the next election or even maybe get thrown out of office, start talking about entitlements and how we have to rein them in to balance the budget. Start caring about our national debt. You won't get elected. You really won't. And that saddens me. Doing the right thing is not politically correct in this country. It's not. And that's sad. The market can self-regulate in some sense. Now, it doesn't completely, because the depravity of man, Christians, you know this. The implications of the fall are severe, and man is inherently evil. You know, that's unfortunate. That bothers some liberals to hear. That bothers some secularists to hear, but it's true. If you don't believe me, just look at all the corporate abuses over the years. And now you know what we do? We outsource our child labor. Say, oh, shoot, we can't do that here. Well, you can't even say we want to do that here, but we can't do that here. So we send it over to China, and we buy all our stuff for low cost from China. So man's corruption, man's evil. Paul explains this clearly. There's none righteous, no, not one. For all have sinned, and he goes on to explain what that looks like. But in any case, their markets don't self-regulate because these companies are run by people. And I want government to be sure that Tylenol is in the Tylenol capsule. But so we all want some level of regulation. We just don't want the volatility and the risk of just leaving things to the conscience of people, the moral state of people. I get that. So we want some checks and balances is the way to say it. Some protection. But markets don't self-regulate because of sin. And we need some regulation in the markets. Insider trading isn't good. Martha Stewart learned that. But still, less government is not accountable for economic outcomes. And lastly, there's something we should talk about with respect to taxes. More taxes, tax increases, do not necessarily put more money in the government coffers, because sometimes they just exacerbate the situation. They tire people, they fatigue people into pulling back on innovation and investment and all the rest. There are some loopholes that we could close, and that would be a good thing for the uber rich. I know some people are cringing right now, and I'm okay with that. There are some loopholes that we could close. but we're not going to tax our way to prosperity. You know this, if you're running your company efficiently, you're not going to cut your way beyond running it efficiently. You can't cut your way to prosperity. You can cut yourself right out of business. So taxes really increase the cost of doing business. I'd like to see corporate income taxes eliminated. There, I'll just drop that bomb here at the end of this episode. Personal income taxes account for about 45% of federal revenue. 36% comes from payroll taxes and 12%-ish from corporate income taxes. Imagine the growth. And I know the left would say, oh my goodness, he's trying to favor the fat cats and the big corporations. No, I'm not. 95 point some percent of these businesses are small who would be impacted by this. They go hire more people and make more money and prosper. You still get the income on the personal side when they take money out of the business if you do it right. But anyway, that would be a good growth strategy, I think. But it requires a philosophical change, and that philosophical change is government is not accountable for propping up the economy. It's not. It needs to make sound, long-term business decisions. You do this, and I do this with our personal finances. We don't do the immediately gratifying. We don't posture, I hope, for our spouse or children and make economic decisions that give them the illusion everything is well, knowing that it's going to bankrupt us. That doesn't work that way. We think longer term, and I'd love it if government would do so. Can government be more efficient? Yes. But if you take the entire executive branch, which is most of the stuff we see government doing, and you eliminate it altogether, and you don't tweak military spending or entitlements, you still don't balance the budget. Isn't that something? The elephant in the room is difficult to talk about. And government overreach is certainly a problem, but it's a philosophical problem. I hope this is helpful to you. I'm going to talk more in our next episode about this topic. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about budgets and deficits, because a little more time, because that's really important. There's mandatory and discretionary spending and a bunch of other things. There are a lot of buzzwords you hear in the press about government and the economy, and we'll talk about that next week. So I appreciate you being here and listening to this rant on our government's role in the economy. I'm not pretending that this podcast episode could turn the tide, but I would love it if you would put this episode on your social media, share it with friends, and push it out there. It's important to get this message across. It's important that our expectations of government change. I don't believe we're too far gone. I believe God is able, and I believe God is faithful, and I trust in the wisdom of the electorate, most of the electorate anyway. So thank you for listening. Please like, share, review, and subscribe to Relentless Truth. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Send along an email to me at john@johnwarrenmedia, or use our contact form. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Relentless Truth with John Warren. Please consider sharing this podcast and subscribe to receive future episodes. Connect with John regarding your comments, questions, and show ideas through johnwarrenmedia.com or at John Warren Media on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. That's all for this episode. Join us next week for another edition of Relentless Truth with John Warren.